Every night, for 6 months, the same man walked into my store at exactly 2:17 a.m. and ordered the exact same thing, word for word, same tone, same amount of change, down to the penny. 2 nights ago, for the first time, I couldn't get it for him. Last night, 3 people in this town didn't wake up. I run the overnight counter at a 24-hour convenience store off a 2-lane highway, the kind of place that mostly gets truckers, third-shift factory workers, and the occasional lost tourist looking for a bathroom. Nothing happens most nights. You restock the cooler, you mop twice, you watch the parking lot lights buzz, you go home at 7. The man started showing up in early spring, always alone, always on foot. Even though there's nothing walkable, for miles, I never once saw a car. Always at 2:17 a.m. Not 2:15, not 2:20. I checked the registered timestamps obsessively after a while, and it was 2:17 every single time, sometimes down to the same minute and second. His order never changed. A small black coffee, no sugar, no cream, and a single pack of a store-brand butterscotch candy we sell maybe twice a month to anyone else. He'd pay an exact change $1.11 every time, like he'd counted it out at home before he ever walked in. He never said more than he had to. Coffee, butterscotch. Then he'd nod once, take the bag, and walk back out into the dark. I never saw which direction. I never asked. At first, I assumed he was just a creature of habit. Plenty of regulars are, truckers especially. Same order, same seat, same 7M every day of their working life. I didn't think about him much beyond that, except that 2:17 became a kind of internal clock for me. If he hadn't come in yet, it wasn't really 2:17. If he had, the rest of the night would go exactly the way it always did. Quiet, uneventful, safe. That part, it turns out, mattered more than I understood. About 4 months in, I mentioned him to the day shift manager during a shift changeover, mostly just making conversation. She got quiet in a way that surprised me. "The butterscotch guy?" she said. "Yeah, he's been coming in at 2:17 since before I started here. 6 years, maybe more, according to the guy I replaced." I laughed and said that was oddly specific. She didn't laugh back. "Just make sure he gets what he orders," she said. "Every night. Don't ever tell him you're out." I asked why. She said she genuinely didn't know, only that it had been passed down to her the same way, from the clerk before her, and that clerk had heard it from the one before that. Some unofficial rule with no explanation attached, just a firm instruction repeated at every shift handoff, for as long as anyone could remember. Keep the coffee, keep the butterscotch, don't ever run out. I want to be honest, for a while, I thought that was just small-town superstition. Every gas station has one. The cursed pump. The bathroom you don't go into after midnight. I filed it under that and kept restocking the shelf a little more carefully than I needed to, mostly because it was easy, and mostly because it didn't cost me anything to just do it. Here's where it stopped being easy, and if you're still watching, you already sense where this is going. 2 nights ago, our supplier truck was 6 hours late. A logistics mess, nothing supernatural about it. A blown tire outside of the distribution center, completely mundane. By 2 a.m. we were out of the store brand butterscotch entirely. Sold the last bag to a trucker around midnight who probably has no idea what he actually walked away with. I remember standing behind the counter at 2:14, genuinely nervous in a way I couldn't fully justify to myself, hoping the man just wouldn't show up that night. Some nights he didn't, maybe 1 night in 30, no pattern to it that I ever found. At 2:17, the bell over the door chimed. He walked up to the counter the same as always. I told him, as normally as I could manage, that we were out of the butterscotch supplier issue, should be back in stock by tomorrow. Genuinely sorry. He didn't say anything for a long moment. He just looked at the empty spot on the shelf where the candy usually sat, like he was making sure I wasn't lying to him. Then he looked back at me and for the first time in 6 months, he said something other than his order. "That's not good," he said, quiet, almost apologetic, like he felt bad for me, not for himself. Then he took the coffee, left exact change on the counter anyway, and walked back out into the dark without the rest of it. I didn't think much of it, beyond feeling vaguely unsettled. I finished my shift at 7, went home, slept. I woke up to my phone full of messages about a gas explosion at a maintenance facility 2 towns over. 3 workers on the overnight crew didn't make it out. The timeline the news gave placed the failure at right around 2:20 a.m., just a few minutes after a man I'd never properly looked at walked out of my store without something he'd apparently been collecting, uninterrupted, for 6 years. I called the previous clerk, the one my manager mentioned, the one who used to work this counter before her. Took some digging to find his number through an old employee list, but I got through. I asked him, as carefully as I could, if he'd ever run out of the butterscotch during his time here. There was a long silence on the line. "Once," he finally said, early on, before I understood what the rule was actually for. Another pause. "You don't want to know what happened that week. I still don't fully understand it. I just know I never let it happen again after that, and neither should you." I asked him what he thought the man actually was, who he actually was. He said he'd stopped trying to answer that question years ago, because every answer he came up with made it harder to keep doing the job, and he needed the job. Then he told me something that's kept me up since. He said the order had gotten slightly different over the years, small details shifting, like the exact change amount or the brand of coffee, but the core of it, the coffee and the candy, arriving at 2:17, had apparently been happening long before he was ever hired, long before this store existed under its current ownership. He said the man he served wasn't necessarily the same man each time, just the same order, handed off, night to night, counter to counter, clerk to clerk, like something being kept fed on a schedule nobody fully understands, by people who only know the one rule that matters: don't ever run out. I still work the counter. The butterscotch shipment came back the next day, and I've been keeping 4 extra bags in the back specifically for him now, in case the supplier's ever late again. I check the shelf before every shift starts, the way you'd check a smoke detector battery, not because you expect the worst, but because you've seen what happens when nobody bothers. He still comes in at 2:17, same order, same exact change. I don't ask him questions anymore. I don't really want the answers. Last night, though, for just a second, before he took his bag and turned to leave, he looked at me a little longer than usual. "You're doing good," he said. Then the bell chimed, and he was gone into the dark, same as every night. I don't know what I'm actually keeping fed behind this counter. I've genuinely decided I don't want to find out. I just make sure the shelf's never empty. Every ticket I close gets logged under my employee ID. Tonight, I found 41 tickets closed under that same ID that I never opened. The oldest one is dated 11 years ago, 3 years before this company even existed under its current name. I worked the overnight shift in a network operations center, a NOC, for a company that monitors IT systems for a few hundred retail stores and warehouses across the country. If a payment terminal crashes in Ohio or a warehouse scanner goes offline in Texas, we're usually the first people to know. From midnight until 8, it's usually just me and one other technician sitting in a room full of monitors, drinking terrible coffee and clearing tickets until sunrise. Most nights are boring. An alert comes in. You run the approved script. The system comes back online. You close the ticket. Repeat. Except for Rack 12. Rack 12 sits inside our own data center, 2 floors below the NOC. According to the asset inventory, it was permanently decommissioned 6 years before I joined the company. It shouldn't even have electricity. Yet once or twice every month, always sometime after 3 in the morning, Rack 12 generates another maintenance ticket. Fan warning. Temperature alert. Routine health check. Nothing unusual. The ticket gets assigned to whoever is working nights. Usually me. I remote into the rack. Run the maintenance script. Close the ticket. One night my supervisor noticed me staring at another Rack 12 alert. He shrugged. Don't worry about 12. It's been doing that longer than anyone remembers. That was enough for me. Until 3 weeks ago, the ticketing system glitched during a database sync with another regional office. For maybe 5 seconds, my queue filled with tickets from another site before correcting itself. Most belonged to technicians I'd never heard of. One belonged to me. Same employee ID, same username, same formatting. Only one problem. It had been closed 4 years before I was hired. I grabbed a screenshot before it disappeared. The next night, I showed my supervisor. He barely looked. HR recycles employee IDs. You inherited somebody else's. That sounded reasonable. Company policy even confirmed they sometimes reused IDs. But something bothered me. So I checked HR. According to my employee record, my ID had never belonged to anyone else. No previous owner. No reassignment. No termination. It had simply remained active for 11 straight years. I've worked here for 14 months. I should have stopped looking. Instead, I pulled every archived maintenance record tied to Rack 12. Thousands of tickets. Every one identical. Alert generated. Maintenance completed. Ticket closed. Exactly 90 seconds. Every time. For more than a decade. Nobody ever escalated one. Nobody ever spent longer than 90 seconds on Rack 12. Eventually, curiosity won. I went downstairs. The data center was almost silent. Rows of retired servers sat covered in dust. Rack 12 looked exactly the same, until I noticed the drive lights. Solid green. Working. I connected a diagnostic laptop. The maintenance script was already running. Not remotely. Locally. I checked the execution history. Every maintenance job for the past 11 years had started from inside Rack 12 itself. No technician sessions. No remote logins. Only local execution. The rack wasn't waiting for technicians. It never had. It completed the maintenance before the ticket ever appeared. The ticketing system simply attached a technician's name afterward, usually mine. The next morning, I called facilities. I asked who originally maintained Rack 12. The woman was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "There used to be an overnight technician assigned to that room. He died during a shift. They didn't find him until 2 days later. I asked his name. She said she'd have to check. She never called back. When I called again 2 days later, there was no record of that conversation. No record of any technician dying. It was as if I'd imagined the whole thing. That night, another Rack 12 ticket appeared. I ignored it. 90 seconds later, it closed itself. Technician. Me. I hadn't touched my keyboard. That was enough. The next morning, I submitted my resignation. HR approved it within the hour. My final shift was scheduled for Friday night. I packed my desk, turned in my locker key. Everyone shook my hand. My supervisor even wished me luck. For the first time in weeks, I thought it was over. At 7:06 Saturday morning, I walked out of the building for the last time. Monday afternoon, my phone rang. It was payroll. The woman sounded confused. "Just checking something," she said. "You forgot to clock out after your Sunday overnight shift." I laughed. I wasn't here Sunday. You resigned Friday. There was silence. Then keyboard clicks. No, she said quietly. You definitely worked. She read off my employee ID. She read off my badge number. Clock in. 11:01 p.m. Clock out. 7:02 a.m. Exactly my old shift. I told her someone had made a mistake. She apologized and said she'd investigate. An hour later, she called back. Her voice sounded different. Careful. I checked security. Your badge opened every door it was supposed to. The server room, the break room, the NOC, everything. I told her my badge was sitting in my kitchen drawer. She stopped typing. Then she asked, "Can you check?" I opened the drawer. The badge was gone. I drove back to the office. Security wouldn't let me inside. The guard recognized me immediately. "Didn't you just leave?" he asked. I told him I hadn't been there since Friday. He frowned. "I watched you come in last night." He turned his monitor toward me. The security recording showed someone wearing my badge, my uniform, my height, my walk. The camera angle never showed the face. The figure disappeared into the data center at 3:02 a.m. At 3:04, Rack 12 generated a maintenance ticket. At 3:05, the ticket closed. Technician, me. The figure never came back out. Payroll keeps calling every Monday. Apparently, I still work every Sunday night. I still receive a paycheck. Taxes still come out. Benefits are still active. No one at the company can remove me from the schedule. Every attempt fails with the same message. Employee required for schedule continuity. I haven't gone back. I never will. But every Monday morning, another completed Rack 12 ticket appears under my employee ID. Completed in exactly 90 seconds. I don't know who's working my shift. I just know. They've never missed one. Rack 12, routine maintenance. Assigned technician, you. Somebody's been giving me orders over this radio for 8 months. Tonight I found out corporate never assigned anyone to this channel. And the last 3 instructions I followed didn't come from a person at all. I worked the overnight stocking shift at a big box grocery store just off a state highway, the kind of place you've probably stopped at without remembering the name. The job was simple. Clock in, grab a pallet jack, wear the radio, fill shelves until sunrise. Regional dispatch handled the overnight logistics, delayed trucks, damaged pallets, inventory corrections, normal retail stuff. Then there was aisle 6. Twice a week, sometimes more, the radio would click. Hold aisle 6, customer inbound. Same calm voice. Same exact wording. Every time. I'd roll a pallet across the entrance, or set out a wet floor sign and politely send whoever was coming that way over to aisle 5. Nobody ever argued. At 2 in the morning, people don't care which aisle has the canned soup. When I asked my manager during training why aisle 6 kept getting closed, he barely looked up from his paperwork. Corporate policy. That was enough for me. For 8 months. Everything changed because of 4 seconds of radio interference. There was a burst of static. Then another man's voice cut through, clear and irritated. "I don't know why store 214 keeps logging aisle 6 holds. There isn't an aisle 6 protocol for that location." Silence. Then the familiar voice returned immediately, smooth as ever. "Hold aisle 6, customer inbound." I stood there holding a case of pasta sauce, realizing I'd never once questioned who was actually speaking in my ear. The next morning, I called regional dispatch directly. The woman who answered sounded exactly like the voice I was used to, only human. I asked about the aisle 6 instruction. She sounded confused. We don't issue aisle-specific hold orders. I thought she'd misunderstood. The one that says, customer, inbound. A longer pause. We've never transmitted that. I asked who else could access the radio system. No one. I asked if another department shared the frequency. No. Then she asked me a question that stuck with me. Who told you we did? That night, I walked down aisle 6 without blocking it. For the first time, I actually looked. The shelves were ordinary. The products were ordinary. But the floor wasn't. The tile underneath the shelving didn't match the rest of the store. Different color, different pattern, older, scuffed in places the newer tile never was. It looked like a section of floor that had simply been left behind when the rest of the building was renovated. I asked one of the day shift stockers about it, a guy who'd worked there almost 30 years. He stopped mid-motion, a case of water still in his hands, and stared toward aisle 6 for a long moment. That used to be the stockroom entrance, he said quietly, before this company bought the building. What was here before? He shook his head once. They told us not to ask, said the old owners left a mess, and it was better left sealed. Then he walked away and didn't speak to me again that week. A few nights later, the radio clicked again. Hold aisle 6, customer inbound. I looked up. The store was empty. No customers, no other employees on the floor, nothing. The voice repeated itself, same tone, same words. Hold aisle 6, customer inbound. I stayed where I was. Then I noticed the wet floor sign. It was already standing across the entrance. I hadn't touched it. I walked over slowly. Someone had positioned it exactly where I always left it, perfectly centered, legs locked. I checked the security cameras later. No one had moved the sign. The footage simply skipped forward 18 seconds. One frame, the sign leaned against the end cap. Next frame, it blocked the aisle. No movement, no person, just there. I should have left it alone after that. Instead, I decided I needed to know why the aisle mattered. The following Thursday, the radio came alive again. Hold aisle 6, customer inbound. I ignored it. A man in a gray hoodie pushed a shopping cart toward the canned vegetables, ordinary, tired, looking at his phone. The voice came again, louder this time, almost urgent. Hold aisle 6. I watched him turn into the aisle. Halfway down, he stopped. Not like he'd seen something on the shelf. Like something had noticed him. His head tilted slightly, the way people do when they're trying to hear a sound that isn't quite there. Then he pushed the cart farther in. The lights over aisle 6 flickered once. Every other light in the store stayed steady. I blinked. The man was gone. Not running, not ducking behind a display. Gone. His shopping cart sat in the middle of the aisle, still rolling forward a few inches before it drifted to a stop. I sprinted toward it. The aisle was empty. The emergency exit at the far end was still armed. The red light hadn't changed. No doors had opened. No alarms had sounded. I checked the cameras myself before the police arrived. According to the footage, the man never entered aisle 6. He walked toward it. Then, 32 seconds of video simply weren't there. The next frame showed only an empty cart in the middle of the aisle. Police called it corrupted video. Corporate replaced the DVR the next day. Management told everyone the customer must have walked out another exit while no one was looking. No missing person report was ever connected to the store. Officially, nothing happened. I called dispatch one last time. The woman answered on the first ring. Before I could speak, she asked, very quietly, "Did you ignore the instruction?" I couldn't answer. She let out a slow breath. "You're the third store." Then the line disconnected. I still work there. The radio still clicks 2 or 3 times a week. Hold aisle 6, customer inbound. Now I don't hesitate. I block the aisle immediately. Sometimes there really is a customer coming. Sometimes the store is completely empty. I've stopped trying to tell the difference. Because once I didn't listen, and someone never walked back out. A voice I don't recognize, softer, almost pleased, whispers through the static. Good. Silence. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. And if you've ever experienced something strange while working the night shift, tell me about it in the comments. I read every one.